Is this on? No. Is it on? I did. Good evening. Welcome to this, the sixth in the series of modern Mexican architecture, which is a series that was designed to bring to Los Angeles the last 50 years of the modern movement of architecture in Mexico. We started with José Villagrán, who is the father of modern Mexican architecture, and we went through 5 of the giants of modern Mexican architecture, and we were to have concluded the series with tonight's lecturer, Ricardo Legorreta, because of his special relationship not only to Mexican architecture but to José Villagrán. Unfortunately, due to a conflict in scheduling, the lecture with Augusto Alvarez and his sometime collaborator Juan Soto Madaleno had to be scheduled for next week. So next week, the 19th, Wednesday the 19th, will be the last in our series. Will be Augusto Alvarez and his collaborator Juan Soto Madaleno. Our lecturer tonight is Ricardo Legorreta, whose work is becoming increasingly well known outside of Mexico, and I'm sure to many of you he really needs no introduction. I met Ricardo about 22 years ago in Mexico, and at the same time that I met José Villagrán. At that time, Maestro Villagran was the Dean of the School of Architecture at the National University of Mexico and was at the peak of his architectural career. In his office was a young man, and still in his 20s, who was his design partner. At the time I first met Ricardo, he was beginning to have doubts about the validity of the so-called international school as it related to Mexico. And from 1959 to 1964, Ricardo was a design professor at the university. And in 1965, he went out in his own practice and began to put to practice those ideas that had been stirring around in him during the periods previously. In many ways, Ricardo is probably the most Mexican of all the Mexican architects. He has a great deal of pride in the culture of Mexico, and this shows in his work. Tonight, Ricardo will show you his work and discuss with you his philosophy and some of the roots of Mexican architecture. Ricardo Legorreta.
That's it? Okay. Well, I understand this was done for a party, and I don't know if I'm supposed to dance, but I'm not able to do it, so I will try to talk a little bit. Well, first of all, I want to thank you very much for the invitation to come here and to collaborate in putting together the group of speakers. You all know that it's very difficult to coordinate architects, but when they are Mexican architects, things becomes much more difficult. So I'm very pleased to be able to help for various reasons. First, as Sidney said, because I'm very proud of being Mexican. Second, because I feel that Mexico is perfectly badly understood in the United States. And third, because I know that in a few years, California will be majority Mexicans. We are already making plans to recover the land. And so we better start planning in something like that. Of course, I'm sure that through the past lectures of all the distinguished architects, you have already a clear panorama of what the Mexican architecture is. Through Villagran and Del Moral, you heard through two of the most definitive architects in Mexico, through Agustin Hernandez, González de León, and Zabludowski. You have heard architects which are very active and doing excellent architecture. You will see in Álvarez and Sordo another group of architects which are working very successfully. So it's difficult for me because after organizing all this and talking with Sidney who should be invited, etc., now I might find myself that it's difficult for me because I have nothing to say in addition of the quality of my colleagues. But anyhow, I started to think about what can I really say here in the benefit of all of us. I don't consider that this is only a benefit for a country, for you, or for me. I think it's a benefit for all of us. So please, I ask you to hear this thing and participate on it, on an interchange of opinion. This is not a lecture. I want to give my opinions, and I want to hear all your comments, especially your criticism. I feel that it's very important to explain what is a person and how he thinks to really understand what he's doing. And if you get involved in trying to understand an architect, which is almost impossible, you have to try to understand what he feels about architecture. I think that architecture is very easy to define, very difficult to do it, but very easy to define. But what we architects think about architecture, that is completely different. I think we have a tremendously bad education, and I have seen that all over the world. I think we are educated in a way in which we always think we are the kings of the world. We are supposed to teach people how to live, to teach society how to behave, and the only thing we are expecting is that in the next election you have an architect as a president. So, and I think it's completely mistaken. I really believe that we are a consequence of a society. We architects think that we can create a society, and I think it's a tremendous lie on it. So an architect is a consequence of a society and a consequence of himself. So I feel that nobody is an exception. I don't believe in genius. I believe that we all are a consequence of a situation, of a society, and of our own way of being. Personally, to me, the life is, I think, is marvelous. I enjoy it very much, but it's very difficult. I don't have the ideas in 30 seconds and try to be genius. I think it's a process of thinking and make a tremendous effort. So the first thing I would like to know and to show you is why and from where I come and why do I exist and why I'm doing these things. The easiest thing will be to tell you that I am a genius and that everything I am inventing is not true. What is what I do, how I think, and what I'm trying is what I would like to tell you, and I hope you see it through my work. To analyze this, I would like to just very briefly take a look at the situation in the world at this moment. I'm not capable, and I not pretend to give a complete analysis of the world, but I think it's worth to give a little review to it, because it has to do very much with architecture. I think we all know that the world is upside down. The real values are exactly misunderstood. Everything is on the materialism. There are no leaders, especially in the Western world. We do not have any leaders. I think we are bored about life, and that's the society we are right now. I'm very optimistic that the young people will react. They are already reacting. You have your first reactions in the 60s, and now I see that it's coming along. Something has to happen, otherwise we better quit. The situation in the world is all around the same. The tremendous problem of the communications. At the beginning, I was very impressed by communications. Now I am very afraid of. I think we have received more damage than benefit of all these communications, because instead of doing good things, we are all making the same mistakes. I went through a little series of trips just now for studying some new towns, and I found out that we are all making the same mistakes, and very few are doing the right things. The situation of America, by America I must say that I understand the whole continent. You appropriate the name of America, but America is the whole continent. I see it different from Europe. I don't know very well the Far East, nor the Orient, but on the Western world, I see that America is doing things. Europe impressed me very much. They are not doing anything. The pressure of their past is too heavy. So what I have seen and the few new things they are doing, I'm talking, of course, about architecture, I don't see anything positive on it. And so America looks always to me as an opportunity of doing great things. We are young countries with all the characteristics of young countries. We have all the energy, the decision, the irresponsibility to do things, because you need a good amount of irresponsibility to do things. I always remember the famous phrase that the only ones that do not make mistakes are the people who don't do anything. So that's America. How I see the United States and how I see Mexico, and why do I put them together? I put them together because it's no doubt that the border line is completely artificial, geographically and culturally. It's a result of a war, and that's it. And we live together. We are going to live together for a long time. But so that's why I always relate the United States and Mexico. And I see certain similarities and certain things completely opposed. The situation at this moment is very special. You are having all kinds of problems through a civilization that you create, that you were the leaders, you are the leaders in the world, and now suddenly you are having problems with that civilization. On the other hand, we are coming behind you all the time. We always say, the day we are like the United States, we are going to be great. And suddenly we find out that you're having problems. You're having problems, we're having oil. And what are we going to do with our oil? The problem is, is that we don't want to do the same mistakes everybody has done. So we have right now in Mexico a very special situation. For the first time in our history, we can speak very loud to your president. We can cut out the tuna fishing. We can discuss about labor, etc. We are building a lot. We're investing a lot of money. So the opportunities are great, but are great to do good things and to do mistakes. I went, as I said before a little bit, to visit new towns. I'm getting involved in a beautiful project, which is finally Mexico City is getting decentralized. You all know that Mexico City is a disaster. It's about 15 million people altogether, and it's a complete mess. So the reason we are all together there is because of political reasons. Power is very centralized in Mexico. You know, the president of Mexico is the strongest dictator in the world. The only advantage is that we change it every 6 years. But it is a dictator. Finally, we are moving out, and one of the major banks is moving outside of Mexico City to a town called Querétaro, about 100 120 miles out of Mexico City. So I am in charge of doing the new city, which is not going to be a town city. It's going to be a city of about 50 to 60,000 people. So I went to see trying to see the new towns. And I went to England, to France, and to the east and west part of the United States. And it's very shocking, that trip. It was a very fast trip. We went a week to each place, and it's like going to a movies. And really, after that, you have to digest all what you see. Because you find that in England, they are trying to live the way you live in California. In California, you are trying to live the way they live in Italy. In France, it's a complete mess. I was involved in this in one of the groups, which unfortunately, we lost for the proposal of the Bunker Hill project. And all the discussions and everything I heard of the American architect was, let's do a town like the one in Europe. And then I go to England and I see the latest new town, and they have a shopping center exactly the same as the one you have in nearby. All the mistakes are done. They are creating cities which are completely artificial. I was really scared when I went back and the president of the bank asked me about my experience. I told him, get rid of all the architects and planners, because everything that is done the way we think is mistaken. I saw the cities in which they separate the traffic of cars from pedestrians, and the city is dead. At the moment you get involved in all the things we complain about, not having parking, not being able to cross the street because it's full of cars, then the life come again. All the people who design the new towns in Paris, they live around Paris. They live in Paris. They don't live in the new towns. That is, I think for me, was a very clear and materialized picture of the world. We are all mixed up. There is a mess in everything. Of course, architecture, as I said, for me is a consequence of society. So architecture is always also a mess at this moment. In the 40s, the 50s, and part of the 60s, the road was very clear. Just design the way Mies designed, and you are all set. It doesn't matter what you put in. It has to be glass and steel, and that's it. Once I was in I was in Chicago in MIT, and it was my first lecture in the States. And fortunately, I had right next to me Felix Candela, the great Spanish architect who lived in Mexico. And he said to me, look, Ricardo, forget about it, say whatever you think, and that's it. That was a typical Spanish position, and I did a tremendous... So I did the tremendous mistake of saying in the middle of Chicago that one of the worst things that has happened to Mexican architecture was Mies van der Rohe. So you can imagine that I was almost thrown, but it's true. For us has been a disaster, that influence, because it's completely against all our things. But anyhow, at that time, everybody had the picture very clear. Then came the chaos. The young people protested with all the rights. And now, in the 60s and 80s, I feel that all our idols in architecture, either they are dead or the credit is not on their side anymore. So now we are criticizing. It's a complete change of the position of architecture and of architects. We are not more architects. We are businessmen. Everything is superficial. Everything is commercial. I still remember that I sent a letter of complaint to the editorial that Peter Blake wrote in his wonderful magazine, Architecture Plus, that only lasts for a couple of numbers. When Louis Kahn died, he wrote an editorial, which I have. Tom saw it in the office. I hung it in my office, in which he said that with the death of Louis Kahn, architecture was finished. That now it only remains some architects, huge offices, who do good work, first-class work, but not excellent work. I wrote him and I said that he was mistaken, that I was sure that somebody was going to come out thinking the other way. I'm afraid he was right, because I see more and more that we are involved in business, in commercial, and the tremendous drug, which is worse than any drug, which is publicity. I was saying that I think that we architects design for two things. We design for other architects, and we design for photographers. We always criticize women because we say that they dress themselves for other women, and we architects design for other architects and photographers. We have new things. I always remember that somebody told me that in Mexico, every time we design a new thing, everybody compares what we do with older things. And they told me in the States, we don't have that problem, because you can create a style every week. And it's true. And now with all this new language we use, which to me is very difficult to understand, it's already difficult to understand the foreign language. With all this new language that is done, is used now, I found that the basic thing to do architecture is to invent a new word. So now you have postmodernism, which is just a new word. You saw in Agustin Hernandez that if you want to do really outstanding things, you can really do them. And we don't care about them. Then any ism you want to invent, you can create a new style. As a matter of fact, I got involved in one, and I want to tell you the true story. I'm not saying lies. They called me to publish some of my work in Architectural Record. So Ray Smith went to Mexico, saw my work. We went out for dinner. We discussed architecture for 2 hours, and he went back to New York. And the next thing I heard was that I was a minimalist. So immediately I called him and I said, please explain me what is minimalism, because I don't know. I don't have the answer. I don't know what is minimalism. On the opposite, a client of mine told me one thing when we finished the house. And he said, Ricardo, you always claim you are very simple, that you're always looking for simple things. And he said to me, you are the most complicated person I have ever met. You are so complicated that you appear to things to be simple, and it's not true. So any other thing we can here try to say that I have a philosophy, or any of you has a philosophy of how to use color, how to use proportion, etc. The reason of that is that we are only using the outside part of the picture. So here I come and I see in California, somebody tells me, I'm going to show you my Mexican house. What is Mexican? You only buy tile, red tile, you put plaster, and that's Mexican. And it's not true, and it's the same way we see you. Everything is superficial. And one of the things, for example, I'm very worried is that the other day somebody told me, Ricardo, you're already creating a style of architecture in Mexico. And I said, I'm very worried about it, because it comes out to doing things in plaster and painting in color. And that claims to be a style, and it's not true. So I feel that the problem is much more deeper, as everything in life. And unless we start to work really seriously, we are going to keep playing all the time the way we are doing architects. I am very shocked every day with all these theories and all that. The theory of doing exhibits, art exhibits of our sketches, I think is crazy. I think that we do these sketches to be able to build buildings. It's like making an art exhibit of the hammer that Michelangelo used to make these sculptures. These sketches are tools, are not a matter of showing them and be pride and all that. So that's the problem I see. We architects are too worried about ourselves. We take ourselves too serious. We want to appear in magazines. We want to appear in every place. And I think the only thing we have to do is go back home and work like anybody else works and do our best. Why do I think that? Now I'm getting a little bit into my personal thing, and I want to tell you a little bit of who I am and how I work and what I do so you can understand. And it comes because I have been born and raised in Mexico all my life. I received a wonderful advice from Walter Gropius. Once he visited Mexico, I was able to sneak into a cocktail and ask him if it was a good idea to go outside of Mexico, come to the States or go to Europe to study. And he gave me a very simple answer. He said to me, just, where are you going to work and live? And I said, in Mexico. So stay here, he said, and travel as much as you can. The only thing he didn't give me was the money to be able to travel, but it was a very good advice. And I followed up. So I have been living in Mexico. I'm Mexican. And through my family, through my father, my own family life, I like very much my country. What influences I have received? It's a very typical question of what influences you have. I must tell you that I have different fields of influence. One from Villagran, which you met, that he influenced me very strongly in the sense of ethics, sense of responsibility, and really a love for our profession. It sounds very cold, very rigid, the thing, but I feel that it's something that is very important to have. Otherwise, it's no use, because if you're looking for money, you're better off putting a hot dog stand in the stadium and you will earn much more money. If it's a matter of publicity, you can get into another things. You really have to be convinced about it. Other kind of influences, as I said before, I'm very much influenced by the way of life in Mexico. We were talking before about how I was educated, and I was lucky enough to study in the old School of Architecture. I still remember in the 50s, our great pride was our new campus, and I was lucky enough not to study in that campus. I studied in the old buildings downtown in Mexico, in the worst conditions of light and all those kind of things. But we were able to live right in the city. So every night after or at noon after the classes, we went to the bar or to the restaurant or to the billiard or wherever it is where everybody goes. So that influenced me very much. The night life in Mexico of the medium and low classes is marvelous. It's one of the best social experiences you can get involved, and we got involved into that. So when you are designing and you're able to get involved in that thing, it really influences you very much. Regarding very specific thing of design specifically, I receive a very strong influence from somebody that very few people know. Now it's getting a little more known. His name is Chucho Reyes. He was a painter, a naive painter, but was the one who really understood color in Mexico. He was the one who really influenced the great muralism, who influenced Barragán, who influenced myself, who influenced Tamayo. As a matter of fact, he was always teasing everybody about that. And he used to make things unbelievable of atmosphere in that way. Of course, I received some influence from Luis Barragán and other architects. I received a very strong influence from Morocco. I was in Egypt a year and a half ago, and I found myself that everybody thought I was Arab. And now I discovered that I may have a lot of Arab blood in my veins, because I'm really, really very impressed by the Arab architecture. So I have, as everybody has, a lot of influences. I don't believe, again, in people who say that they don't have any influences and they don't copy. I think that the person who doesn't receive and he's not open to influences and is not ready to copy, he's lost. It's not true. We all copy each other. And I think it's a very good thing to do and a very good thing to receive influences. What do I think? How is my philosophy? What I look in life for? I can tell you that one thing after all this mess I'm looking for, unfortunately I haven't been able to organize my life enough, is to have peace and to have the benefit of time. We are involved in all this rush of time and running from one place to the other. I would like to be really human and to be able to help people to do good things. I don't care if at the end of my life I end up with 10 good buildings, I don't think it's enough. I would like to leave the will of all the people who work with me to do good things. That is what I would like to. And to be able to do things in which people are happy. As I said before, we design wrongly, we architects. The best thing I would like to receive of a comment of a building is that the people who are there are very happy. And it happens to me one thing which is very representative of what I'm seeing. Suddenly I find that I enjoy very much to design discotheques. And what happens, one time I was thinking one day, why I like to design discotheques. It happens to be that it's a place where people go to have fun. And at least you're very happy of seeing people in a place you design dancing and not trying to discover the philosophy of the architect and what was he thinking. And if he designed the building in a napkin when he was traveling, or if what is his way of thinking, what is he looking in life, they are just having fun. And it's what happens in the good spaces. I always make an experiment, and you can do it 100 times, that you will receive the same answer. Get 6 or 7 architects, no more. You cannot resist more than 7 architects together and discuss architecture. You will discuss philosophy. We will completely destroy everybody. We will destroy from Le Corbusier up to Pei, everything. We will destroy them. And after that, we say, well, now we are tired. Why don't we go out for dinner? You go out for dinner, and without any doubt, the place that will be selected will be the ugliest place from the architect's point of view. Everything will not function, the entrance is wrong, the space, but it's a place where you really enjoy it. And it's true. So that's why I say that is the kind of space I would like to be able to design. To be very honest, I haven't been able to design that space yet. I think I still have to work very hard on taking out all the inferiority complex of architects. So through all this analysis, there is one thing that has impressed me very, very much through my life. And I would like to start showing that thing before showing my work, which is the vernacular architecture. Vernacular architecture is always seen as a curiosity. Everybody talks how beautiful to go to Mexico and see those little towns, how cute the little burros walks on the street and that sort of thing. Or you go to Greece and you say, oh, Greece is beautiful. You go over there and you are on the ship and you go back and forth and everything is white and that's it. But they are, so I started to, through my trips in Mexico, I started to take a lot of photographs of vernacular architecture. And I didn't know why I was taking those photographs until I make an analysis, again trying to get rid of all this architectural thinking, of what has that thing that I enjoy so much, and that also, as we say, the people, with that despective word we use, the architects of people, they also enjoy it. What that thing has. It's not that they have plaster, it's not that they have tile floors. There is something in those constructions that we really enjoy. So I made an analysis and a study, which I would like to show you, under the idea of, let's take a look at this architecture with the eyes of a human being and not with the eyes of an architect. What is there that has so many values? And that is maybe the most strong influence I have had in my life. So I will show you that. I will show you also how you can misunderstand those things. The government of Mexico, a couple of years ago, did a typical demagogic decision. They decided that they were going to remodel some towns of this kind. And they remodeled the towns with a complete lack of understanding. So I will show you some photographs of that restoration, in which, from the point of view of architects, is perfect. It maintains the same materials, etc., etc., etc. And you will see how bad it is. Afterwards, I will show you my work, I tried to select, I did a selection of some very different things. Fortunately, in Mexico, being an architect, you can get involved in very different problems, all the way from a little house to a huge project. So I select different ones, and I took, I must warn you, some photographs which are not very good of the last things we have done, so you can take a look. And after that is your turn to criticize and ask questions. So I would like to start then looking at this thing of the vernacular architecture. I think we can start then. I believe that's it. Well, the first does it bother this light to you or not? No? The first thing it has is that it's human. And we never think about that. I don't know if it happens to you, but it happens to me. We are always looking in our constructions and in our buildings. When we want to take a photograph, we always say, why don't we go on Sundays so we don't have any cars nor any people on it and have a good photograph? Here you can see that not only is for human people, it looks much better when there are people in there. That doesn't happen very often with our architecture. We're always complaining that somebody is standing in front of the entrance or things like that. You can see here, for example, there is on the right our famous transportation system. But it looks very natural in the street. Here, any kind of transportation we have, we are always complaining. We haven't been able to combine cars with our life. We are always saying that cars are disturbing our aesthetics. Look on the left, all this, as I said, all this new vocabulary we use of the multi-use space. Here you can see how in that little plaza, everything is settled to have the market going on, but in a very natural way. I remember our experience when we were visiting that town. Of course, we got involved in the typical conversation that we, the cultured people, have when we arrive to those places trying to discover the secret of it. So we asked them, and they said, well, how do you do business here? And this woman answered me. She said, we don't come to make business. We come to talk with our friends, which we see every week. And it happens to be that I may sell something, and he may buy something. But we don't come to make business. And we do exactly the opposite. We claim that we're doing shopping center as a social center. Is not true. We do shopping centers to sell things to people. And it happens to be that you find a friend over there. It's completely the opposite attitude on it. So basically it's for human people. It's very honest. It doesn't have all those thinking of us. Here you can see how a well on the left and a church are treated. Both use a vertical element, one to show that there is water, the other one to show that there is a church there. And here, again, we architects, we always try to find a symbol, and we should have the horizontal for something, the vertical for the other thing, and we try to make all kind of complicated structure to it. One thing we have lost completely, the sense of life, is mystery. Now, through all this tremendous influence of technology, everything has to be open, all the way from architecture to sex. Everything has to be very easy and very fast and without any pleasure on anything. I still remember one thing. The best compliment I have received from the Camino Real in Mexico was given by a singer who he studied for architecture, and then he became a singer. And he's a friend of mine. So when he started to sing in one of the bars. So the day the hotel was a year old, I invite all the office to the bar to have a drink. When we arrived there, he started to tease us, etc. And suddenly he said, you know, now that here are all the architects of the hotel, I must tell you something that happened to me this morning. So I was walking through one of these crazy corridors, And I saw a worker, and he came to me and he said, "Excuse me, sir, do you know this hotel?" He said, "Of course I know him. I have been working here for a year." And he said, "Please tell me how I get out, because I work on the foundation. I haven't been able to get out of the hotel." I think it's one of the best things. You are able to get lost in that hotel. Everybody complains about it, but I think it's a compliment. So the pleasure of mystery, for example, you can see here, just to take the street on the right, I'm sure it doesn't comply with regulation. It doesn't have the right width. It doesn't have the slope. Somebody will complain that cobblestone is very dangerous, that the sidewalk is very narrow. But you are always intrigued of what's on the other side of it. You feel like walking and find out. The arch on the left, completely crazy, has nothing to do, but it creates a separation of the space, and you feel like wondering what's on the other side. Now, we have to develop the entrance. You should be able to know where is the elevator, where is the exit, and if not, we design a graphic design with huge numbers with a second or an exit to it. Another thing, the common sense is a characteristic of this type of things. You can see on the right, there was no need for a designer or a color expert to decide what was going to be the color of the line. It was the same color of the earth, and that's it. It's very simple. It's common sense. We don't have to make a color scheme out. On the left, the common sense of how you can handle the steps, it only goes through the spaces which are available, and that's it. It's just common sense which we have lost. Together with that, also, function plays a very important thing. Here you can see why there is an overhang. There is overhang so you don't get wet. That's so easy as that. On the left, how one single space handles everything. It shows the entrance, it protects the door, gives a bench to talk with people. You can sit outside. Everything works, but works in a very natural way. You can see here on the left how the steps of the market, together with the steps to go up, they play a role and they serve as an exhibit space, very naturally and very functional. On the right, this is one of the typical games of Mexico, which are marbles. I agree, there is a lack of sanitary conditions over there. But what happens when we planners come in? We say we are going to fix this town. The first thing we do is to pave the street, and we end up with the game of it. The elegance, which we always complain now, architects, that we live under budgets. I cannot think of a cheapest house in Mexico than the one you see on the right. It's just adobe and an equivalent to shingle, or the house on the left. But both have an incredible elegance, something we have lost. Under the excuse of function and cost, we are losing the sense of elegance. Under this concept of informality, we are losing the sense of elegance. Look, for example, how it's solved with all kinds of qualities of individuality, the possibility of working inside and outside, but look the elegance of these streets. And this is a very small town in Mexico. Even to the altars, on the left, a very sophisticated altar. On the right, an altar which is done by the pilgrims in a very small church in Mexico also. The sense of grandeur, I'm not talking about big things, I'm talking about great things. Look, the sensation of importance of things which are done with all the thinking of great people in both entrances here on the two churches, or in this hacienda, in which the patio really has all the dimensions and all the importance of this. This, we're losing it. We do big things, but we don't do great things, which is completely different. And you go even to the idea of this wall or this stair on the left. So it has nothing to do with the size of the construction. It has nothing to do with it. It has to do with the thinking of the people who do those things. The refinement in the design, the refinement on the way of living, which we are again losing. I think that we are losing that pleasure of being refined. of thinking the details, of taking the details out of it. Look the house on the left, how the wood is cut, the columns, the bench. One door is in one color, the other one. Everything is, and it's not casual, it's a natural refinement. On the right, how the entrance of that house is on one side to create a sense of privacy. And all that is a refinement of way of thinking, and it's not a matter of just going to school to learn. The simplicity also, real simplicity, plays a very important role. On the left, you can see a whole group of houses made out of the same material. On the right, how the stone blends to the wood. Everything is very simple. And we try to criticize all those things under excuses of poverty or other things. Here you can see also what we could say the ingenuity of the reaction. Here on the left is a handball court, and it's painted red, and the name is the red one. It's very simple. That's the way they do it. It's not a matter of trying to create a sophisticated name and then dress the poor guy which is in charge of it of some kind, and maybe you could call it here any of these new words we invent. Thus you can see how the churches are decorated. The one on the right is a very famous pilgrimage center, which is called, very easy, Satotonilco, but everything is decorated by the pilgrims. And look the ingenuity, which is everything is done, as well as on the church on the left. Another thing we have lost, intimacy. You have been expert in losing intimacy. I'm very impressed always about the lack of intimacy in the States. Now you have gone to the climax. I don't know what's the next step, but I have found that the poor guy who runs for president has to show all his life, even his intimate life, to be able to be a candidate. I was looking at I don't remember if it was Newsweek or which one, in which they made a comparison if Carter or Reagan were fit for president, and they make all the analysis of the illness, all the details, if he was ready to it, how physical condition he had, etc. And from that, through the houses, through the offices, landscape offices, everything goes against privacy. And we have to have privacy. Human being likes to be private. Here you can see an example. There is a house which is right on the edge of a street, and just by changing the level, putting the columns, the little plants, there's a complete privacy over there. The way the windows are handled here on the left, how you can open there, you don't feel like intruding and knocking over there. There is a private thing in there. Look, even the height of the windows according to the street level, how you can close the other one, etc. So that's something we are losing. Look, the way the windows are treated, always the light is handled very carefully to achieve that privacy that we like so much. Even in a very poor things, such as this one, which are very poor, all those qualities I have mentioned, they are over there. So it's nothing that, I'm not trying to say that poverty is right. We should solve the poverty. But unfortunately, we try to solve poverty. We don't solve poverty, and we destroy all the other values of this. These people also like to be happy. Look how the house on the right, there is a party going over there. But it's so natural that you don't know if they paint the columns for the party or the columns were painted that way. It's very, and even on the cemeteries, the happiness in the way they look at death is much nicer than the way we do. In Mexico, at least, we still you go to the funeral, everybody's supposed to cry, etc. And here is the reaction of these people. Look, the little church on it, and that's the way they look at it. They like to be happy even in death. We were talking about color. The way they use color is unbelievable. I must say, and I always say, that we Mexicans are irresponsible in the use of color. We live with color. I was surprised when we were involved in this project of Bunker Hill to find out that one of the things we have to study was the color scheme. I can tell you that I cannot think of a building, of a wall, or of a space without, at the same time, think about the color. And look, here's why, what you can learn about it. They play with color in such a masterful way that I wish I could handle color the way they handle. And it goes in everything. Look, in any doors, any entrances, all kind of theories from Joseph Albers, and everything falls apart here. Look, even in the cars, you can see the way they handle. One experience of these things is, I don't know very well, I want to study that, but there is a great admiration of Mexicans for Germany, and Volkswagen has been very extremely successful in Mexico. But what happens with the Volkswagen is beautiful, because they go, we save, we discuss the discount, and after we buy the Volkswagen, we immediately do something so it looks different. So you know that people go and spend 30% of the price of the car to do it different. And one of the things they do is to paint it in a very special color. So there you see how they study that, how they paint the colors on the left. Even in the daily life, look, this girl on the left, even she was involved in the progress of civilization, and she bought a plastic umbrella. The color, the way it blends is so easy, so natural. You can't imagine, very few people can live right to those colors like this woman on the right. So color is part of the life of these people. This is one of the best examples I can show you about this thing. This is a house, which is only one room, I found in a road. Of course, again, my stupid mind of the man from the city, I went down and I knocked at the door and I said to the owner, please tell me, what were you thinking when you paint your house? How did you create this thing? And he gave me a beautiful answer. He said, I just like it that way. That was the answer. And look, if you take this and we can create a complete theory and send it to New York, and I'm sure we will get a gallery someplace to exhibit it. Look how everything, here's on the right, one photograph I found in a small town, which I tease Luis Barragan continuously, because I tell him that now I know where he got the idea of his famous stir. But it's the sense, is that natural sense of aesthetics, which we again are very complicated. We are always looking for a refinement on the aesthetics, and these things are done just because they like them. You can see here the cones, in which any sculpture could sign these cones. These are about 40 or 50 cones which are outside. The way all the roofs are handled, everything is just pure plastic. Now, you can say that these people live in a very sad atmosphere. No, they can also drive themselves crazy. So here I'm going to show you something that will really destroy all the postmodernist theories. When a man said that he was going to build his contemporary Aztec temple, and look what he did. He's not an architect, he's not on the magazines, and look what he does. It's unbelievable. What a sense of humor these people have. It's incredible. Look, on the right, that is the ad of a butcher shop. So it is. It's incredible. And this is the way they are. And really, that's why I tell you that every time I see this thing, I learn something. On the left, you see the opposite of what we saw. This bar is named the Red Canyon. Has nothing to do. It's not red, but they just were saying that it's the Red Canyon. Look, all the sense of humor of all these cars, the pop art is all there. There's nothing new that you cannot learn from these things. There it is. The graphic design is there. Everything is done already with an incredible, even to the look on the right. Well, they were writing that thing in that church I mentioned, and there was no space, so they keep going, and nothing happened. On the right, on the left, you can see the design of the floor. That is such a refinement. So they go from one side to the other as masters. And you can see hundreds and hundreds of photographs like this and learn. So you can imagine that this for me is a continuous lessons, because every time I design something and afterwards I go and I see these towns, I feel such an inferiority complex that it's very healthy to go over there. Now look at the mistakes, because you say, okay, this is beautiful. I am an architect, now I'm going to do what these people think. Of course, the first thing we say, we're going to do tile roofs, we're going to use white, etc. So here you're going to see a series of photographs. On the right are the authentic ones, and on the left is the remodeling. Look on the left. They decided that Mexico is white. First mistake. Everything should be white. In this town, I met a woman, and I said to her, I asked her, now what are you going to do? How do you feel about all this remodeling? And she said to me, as soon as they leave, I will paint my house. Look how beautiful. She said, I will paint my house. For her, the house was not painted. White for her was not the color. She was going to paint it. And look, the different sensation on the left to the right. Look, here's the typical thing that happens. We have a serious problem in Mexico. We live too much about tourism. And we have destroyed good part of our civilization because of tourism. Because every time you find a beautiful place, somebody converts it into an international restaurant immediately. Look what the house on the right, how everything is natural. The plants, the hen, everything. Now on the left, you see the typical restaurant in which you can have a gin and tonic. They speak to you in English, and everything is artificial. And then here we're getting into more serious mistakes. On the left, you can see a school. Look, even the shapes of those horrible pyramids, how it looks like a prison. And look the way this boy is on the right, how the freedom, how he can sit wherever he wants, and how the school on the left is really very uninteresting. You can see on the right, all the qualities of architecture are on that window. Structural, aesthetics, protection of the sun, etc. And on the left is the restoration of the towns, the way they decided a Mexican window should look for. First of all, we never use exposed brick. Exposed brick is not Mexican, it's European. Second, the protection on it. So you end up then the lamp, everything is mistaken. So at this stage, I'm much more in favor of Disneyland than of these things. Here you can see the difference of an old wall, which is through the years has been old, rusted and everything. And look on the left, an exposed brick painted white, a concrete slab that goes horizontal, and that's what is called remodeling and making Mexican architecture. Then you get to crazy things. On the right, I agree, you have the problem. What can we do about drainage and about sanitary? On the left is a town which has no market at all. It's a very small town, it didn't need. But these people decided that they need arcades. So they did those crazy arcades showing the brick without any constructive functions. And then, in addition of that, they said that it was much better to have 2 stories. So they built a wall, and there's no window behind it. Nothing behind that thing. So they blocked the windows. And that's the interpretation of Mexico on the left against to the right. And they get into crazy and really serious mistakes, such as this window on the left, which I would like very much to have there some apple or something from Magritte, right? Look on the right. You can criticize, as I was saying about the restaurant. Look at the right. I'm sure that the height of the bench is mistaken. I'm sure that it floods and everything. But where would you like to see it? In the one on the left, on the one on the right? So these are the things that really make me very angry. This is the climax of it. They decided that we should go back to our roots. We should be Mexican. This gives you an idea of these things, and I will, after showing this, and I'm very honestly, after showing you these masterpieces, I was a little afraid about showing your work, my work, because it was very easy now to tell you this is Mexico. I stepped down and nobody criticized me. But I want to run the risk of your analysis, and I'm very honest about it. I would like very much to hear your reactions, your questions, and your comments. So I'm going to show you some of the work that has been done in my office. And intentionally, as I said, I selected very different types of it. I start at the beginning with one of the good lessons, best lessons I have received in my life of architecture, which was getting involved in a restoration. For an architect to really respect another architect's work is quite a challenge, because we are an expert in destroying the work of other architects. And this is an extremely good colonial palace in Mexico City, which is called the Iturbide Palace. It's a palace of the 16th century, which has here, as you can see, a very simple plan. On the right is a street, vertical, and then has the central patio, an arcade around, and then on the upper floors, all the rooms are around it. The idea was to keep whatever was original and not try to play with the imagination of how it was done, the things we didn't have any information on it. So I cleaned the building, and there was an additional floor which was added. I took out the additional floor, and here on the right, there you can see the section. So I covered the whole building with that kind of a airplane wing roof to play it as neutral as possible. And anything that we didn't know the way it was, we did it contemporary. This was the way I found the palace. They had put these glass things on the columns, the arcades with block. There on the right, you can see the third floor, which was not original. So it was really, really in a very bad shape. Take a look on the left to the proportions of the base of the columns. So when we started to excavate, we found about 6 different floors, because Mexico is sinking. So people just put floors on top of it, so we maintain a level. So this was the way we found it. These are some engravings, very old ones, of how the palace was, which is a very well-known building in Mexico City. So we started to clean it out. We took out the original, this skylight. This was the floor we took out. We protect the columns, etc. And this is the way it's right now. So the idea, as you can see, is to recover the proportion of all the spaces. Any lighting has been put very obviously, any artificial lighting. Look, the size of the bases now on the columns. All the furniture is contemporary, and we start to use some contemporary art. Here on the left is a tapestry by Sheila Hicks, which she did inspire on the arches. So we try to maintain everything with the sense of peace, and at the same time being very honest about what we did, so nobody has any doubt that these things were done in this century. It's very interesting when you get into remodeling, to find out that those things that you admire so much, the reason they are so beautiful is that they have been changed through the years. And we find out that this building received several modifications during the century. So from this very sophisticated job, I want to show you one of the challenges I received about doing a very specific problem. It was a small school in one of these little towns. And so I tried to keep the scale of everything in the project. So on the left is very simple. It's 3 stories high, and it has the classrooms, which are broken out. So all the masses look much more on the scale of a town than of a big city. On the right, which is the back part, is they are the rooms of the nuns. And here I try to play basically with walls, color grills, and keep the very strong colors and the scale to the little town. I think at this moment is not very interesting to get into the the details of the planning and all that. I will mention the experience of how we got involved and certain things that has to do with the philosophy we have been talking. And look how all these things were done for nuns, which were extremely conservative. And for them, there was no surprise about the colors, about the spaces, nor nothing. There on the right, you see how I broke the windows in 4, passing the plaster through it, and painting just the sides of the wall in yellow to have that scale. Here you can see it on. All the stairs are with this grill, which is yellow and gives a very nice light on the inside. And I have been also working very much with the, intrigues me very much the use of light. I think we don't get advantage of, nor even of natural or artificial light. Then, moving from there, a job which now is very actual. At the time I did it, had nothing to do with it. I'm saying that it's very actual because now somebody was telling me that I was a pioneer in energy-saving buildings, which is not true. It was not the intention to save energy. The intention was that when I visited the place, I was so impressed by the place that I decided to disappear and hide whatever I will do. These are some things I did in Baja California, in Cabo San Lucas. Wherever you have seen, visit Baja California, if I describe it to you, it sounds like nothing because you only say that it's a very impressive desert that goes all the way to the sea and the water is very cold. So the only attractive thing is that when you start talking about fishing. But when you get there, you have a sensation of peace and the nature is so overpowered that I decided that I was going to disappear whatever I build there. This is the type of, it's almost the moon what you have. So I found myself in front of an old hotel with, which was built about 10 or 15 years before on the so-called California Colonial. And the rest of the beach, which is the one, as a matter of fact, that slide is turning around, but doesn't matter. The units are on the left, and the beach had a slope, which was very good, as you can see on the right, to be able to build these units underground and covered with sand. The idea was to disappear the architecture. And now it happens that energy saving are very good, but that's just pure luck. I was not talented enough to do it. On the left, you can see the plan, which is very simple. In the center, there is a patio and the stairs, so you come from the roof down to the patio. You have in front the living room, and on both sides, each one of the bedrooms in there. So this is what you see from the sea. It was very, you can see on the left some of the arches of the so-called colonial hotel, and on the right, where you look at them, one of the owners happened to be a pilot during the World War. And that was one of my main problems because he decided that I was crazy enough to build bunkers. So we were fighting all the time about the bunkers, and I couldn't convince him that bunkers were very beautiful. So this is what you see from the sea. And on the right, there is in the middle of the two lines of units, in which the ones on the right are already covered. Another thing I am convinced is there is no doubt that the best landscape architect is God. So I just took all the same vegetation of the desert and tried to put it over there. Here you can see on the right, that's the little patio with the entrance, and how you see all the units from the top. There's a closer view of it. And then this is the entrance. I painted all the units on the same color of the sand. Here you can see how they look out and how they work very well because it rains very seldom over there. You can have the cross ventilation because of the ventilation of the bathrooms through it. These are the stairs that come down. Talking about influences, they always tell me that we have, in the office, or myself, we have created a new way of doing plaster. And they say that they even call it the Legorreta plaster. And just to tell you that it's not true anything about those creative things. I will interrupt a little bit here now that I see plaster, how we started working with that idea of plaster. When I was presenting the mock-up room for the Camino Real in Mexico, as always, we were late, and we had to make the presentation the following day. So the president of the company arrived at 6 o'clock, and we had the mock-up room built, but we didn't have even the plaster on the walls. And he got very angry, and he said to me, Ricardo, forget about it. This is going to be a disaster. I'm going to call off the meeting, and I will say that you were not ready, and we will. This was to present the interiors. And he said, we will call a decorator to do the job. So I said to him, look, don't worry, we will have the room ready. So I had all the furniture and everything ready, of course, the carpet, but I had the problem of the plaster. So I called the worker who has worked with me several years, and I said, look, we have to do something. I said, you have to plaster this room in 2 hours. And he said to me, Ricardo, that's impossible, he said to me. Architect, by the time I put all my little things to pass the levels and on all these things, it will take 2 hours. I said to him, well, look, it's impossible. You have to do it. And then as a joke, he told me, well, look, architect, unless I do it by hand, with my own hands, I will be able. And I said, okay, go ahead. So he put 4 workers, and they did the plaster by hand, just taking the plaster by hand and brushing the walls. And that's the way the famous plaster, of course, afterwards, everybody says that we have been thinking about the Mexican texture. It's not true. Well, whoever tells you that is a liar. The plaster came out that way, and that's the way things happen in life. So here's the plaster we were talking about. Here on the inside, again, we did these domes, and then even the swimming pool, we tried to disappear as much as possible from it. Together with that, I want to show you a very personal problem I was involved, which was to design a weekend house in one of those beautiful towns. A lot of the photographs you see of the vernacular architecture are from that town. But it happened to be that the client was myself. And so we decided that we were going to buy a lot in a club which already exists. The promoter of the club is an architect that always comes to us. We always want what we don't have. So he comes every year to ski to Vail, of course. So he decided that the best architecture was the A-frame. And so this was I can show you, this was my picture when I started this job. Oh, these are some of the other ones. No, I think we need the other one, the other carousels. I must tell you that this particular job almost cost me my marriage, because we were fighting so hard with the architect that there was one moment in which my wife told me that I should choose between the house or my marriage, because the problems were getting very, very tough in trying to convince the architect that he was mistaken. Ready? So look, this is the panorama. On the right, this beautiful town. On the left, the typical house that I was supposed to build, the A-frame house. So through the discussions and after the experience of Cabo San Lucas and everything, I promised and I decided that I was going to disappear the house again. So what I did was to build a very simple roof, which you can see on the section on the left. More or less, the line of the earth goes more or less with the steps. So I buried half of the house, and I did 3 very simple platforms. On the lower one, our bedroom. In the middle, the living room and the terrace. And on the upper one, the 2 more bedrooms. And I tried to plant as much vegetation as I could around it. These are photographs when the house was rather new, but now it's completely covered and you don't see anything about it. I paint the house and the walls of the same color of the earth, and I use these traditional roof, which are the round wood sections, and this kind of shingle roof I was mentioning before. Here you can see how it plays. And in this house, the reason I wanted to show you is that I started to do something that now I do it with any building, which I started to really and very truly study the spaces from the inside. Usually we always talk about plans, elevations, and sections. Since this house, I have started to work from the inside, everything. And the last thing I do are the elevations. I don't care how the elevations come out. I don't know how they come out, but anyhow, I don't care about them. So here I started to open the windows according to what I wanted to see from the inside. So you can see that there is no relation of level, size, scale, or proportion. Everything is done according to what I was looking to the inside. Everything is around the slope, so this is what you see coming into the house. Then this is the terrace with the entrance. And I used this kind of glass so I could reflect the town even when you were sitting backwards. And these are the kind of holes I started to open according to the view from the inside instead of thinking about the proportions from the outside. So you can see that there is no relation of any heights, depths, nothing. Here I started to really try to get rid out of all those thinking. Of course, in a house, it's rather easy to do it, but when you get into a large project, what can you do? I will show you a little afterwards what we did on that. Then, how we can handle a large job, because up to now I have shown you this, in which you can more or less play with those elements which are very much inspired in Mexico. But the serious question is, what can you do to take all this influence and this thinking of Mexico when you get involved in a job which is a large job and has nothing to do with what we have been talking about? So when you get into a hotel, what can you do if it's a very large building and then you start to play with all this repetition of elements such as the guest rooms, etc. And how can you maintain that character? I went as a holiday through Mexico to the south, all the way to Yucatan and to a place called Isla Mujeres. In that place, those of you who have been there, it's beautiful because you rent a boat, you go out, they dive, they pick up the lobster, and then they take you to a beautiful beach to cook it. We did that, and when we were having the lobster, again my wife told me, and imagine, one day the architects will come here and ruin this place. And it happened to be that I was the architect because I got the job specifically to do a hotel in that particular site. For those of you who don't know Yucatan, it's an incredible place. It's a very flat area, and this particular place now that is very well known and developed, which is Cancun. The sand is white and the water is blue. And it's unbelievable. It's so delicate that really is a very impressive. Here are some photographs, which I guarantee you that is not an effect of the photograph. That's the way the sea is, and that's the way the sand is on the right. The highest point is 20 feet in that area. So really to do something in there is very dangerous. So I didn't know what to do because it was a very large project. Look, this is the type of thing I saw when I was there to see the site. As you can see, the famous Cancun is just a very narrow strip of land, and it's surrounded by water. So on this side is the Caribbean, then it's a bay over there, so you are surrounded by water all the time. And that was my decision, that I was going to make people live around water, because that's the reason you go over there, to be always surrounded by water. So the basic concept, which is on the right, you can see that I was very lucky because I got the best site, which is the point of that strip. And of course, again, talking about materialism and commercial aspect, the government, when they developed the land, they filled up all the central area. Where it says Laguna, all that was filled up in order to be able to tell the people that they were selling land. The truth is that they filled it up. So really the only part that had some support was the upper part of the drawing, where I placed the guest rooms. The rest was all mud. So I decided that the rest of the buildings, what in hotel terms are called the public spaces, which are restaurants and that sort of things, we had to build it on piles. And I decided that all the rest I will excavate again and recover the sea. So all what says Laguna, all that area was filled up, and the only thing is that they spend money filling it up, and I spend money taking out the filling. But anyhow, we end up living all surrounded by water. The building of the guest rooms, which is the one on the top horizontal, here is a section in which I did this incline building on the left, a vertical one on the right, and in the center, a space which I wanted to develop a very special planting area, because there you always have a wind coming continuously. Again, there's another story I must tell you here. Again, somebody that published this thing said, I was inspired on the pyramids. Again, it's not true. It sounds very beautiful if I tell you that my pre-Columbian influence came here outside and I thought about that thing. Is not true. The reason I did it was because I did want to have the impression that the building was coming out of the water, because the water comes up to that level. So there is no pre-Columbian influence there. Here you can see very clear the shape of the building on the photograph on the left, how it looks from the ocean. And I painted on the same color of the sand, so it changes very beautifully according to the hour of the day. Here on the left you see the pool, and I started to play with round columns, which are very, very soft. I want to be as soft as possible. Here I handled the opposite. Yucatan is very, very white. Everybody dresses on white, and it's very delicate. So I didn't want to use any color at all. So the whole building is the same color, and only very few accents of color I use over there. Here you can see the central patio and how you start to discover the sea when you enter. This is a circulation on the photograph on the left, the way you go to the guest rooms. And there is a basic element in which you change direction, and it's very much connected with the pool. Another thing that intrigues me very much, and now I'm trying to experiment that very much, is the kind of a surrealism in architecture. So I use this pavilion to play with it, and really trying to have all kind of mixed feelings. You don't know which is the column that supports the building and which one is coming from the water, etc. And basically, there are two levels. This one that you are standing on these photographs, and the one of the pool down there. So the dry people are on the upper level, the wet people on the lower level. And here you can see how the column comes out of the water. And I try to really exaggerate that living. Here on the left, you can see the bar is sunken at the water level. So if you have 2 or 3 margaritas, you don't know what is going on here. Look. I put a mirror on the back of the bar, so it's a complete mix-up thing, and you really don't know what's happening. I don't know if it's good or bad, but anyhow, that was the intention. And here you can see how on the photograph on the right there is the pool, then just the platform, and then the lagoon, which is salt water, and is the one that I excavate. And here is how it looks right now. At this moment, it has already fishes and everything, because it's really salt water, and it has movement, etc. This again, the problems of tourism. I got very romantic, and I said that we were going to use local furniture, so I decided to put hammocks, and I forgot that everybody steals the hammocks. So there are no more hammocks over there. Here you can see again how people start to react to the lagoon and use it very, very nicely. How even these parties, as you can see on the right, they are right on the water all the time. And then when you enter the building, I was looking for privacy and to change completely the idea of the light. This is the space between the two buildings. You always look at the sea in one direction or the other, but you start to have the feeling of privacy. And this is what you see from the corridor, and on the left, what you see from the guest rooms, the salt water and the sweet water of the pool. There's the beach and the sea, and these are one of the few things in color I used, which is the henequen, which is the fiber that is grown in that area. We have got involved very deeply also in design of furniture. There is a tremendous lack of furniture in Mexico. So this table you see over there was my design. It's called in the office the Flintstone design, Flintstone because of the size of the legs. Here again, this is the restaurant, some of the bridges and some of the interiors. The discotheque, as I mentioned, I enjoyed very much. So what I did is that the whole, here is very difficult to take photographs of a discotheque, but the whole walls are full of water, and I have bubbles coming out of it. So again with 2 or 3 margaritas, you don't know what level of the sea you are in. Inside of the rooms and on the bar, everything is very quiet in colors, so people are the ones who bring color in more than the design itself. Very few accents of using these handicrafts of Mexico. This was a very beautiful experience because we took all these panels, we sent them to the small town in the north of Mexico where they do it, and they did whatever they like about design, and we just placed them on the furniture. Now, coming to it, a very beautiful problem is, and this is where we are, this is a building we finished a year and a half ago, something like that, which was a very difficult problem because it looked very stark. It sounds very, very impressive because a distribution center for IBM, nothing colder than a distribution center for IBM. In reality, it's a warehouse, again, cooler than distribution center. But it gave us the opportunity of doing something with walls and very few holes on them. Basically, what it is very easy. You can see on the top, on the left, is a storage area, very high one, where it says racks and shelves, which is the section on the right. And it's about a little over 40 feet high. And then an area of shops to repair and a very small area of offices. The area is in Mexico City. It's a very dull area, very difficult. As there are on one side 2 cemeteries, on the other one the freeway, in another one school. So I tried to use a very special approach. I decided that we should disappear a little bit the building and not being very aggressive. So I decided to paint the building gray and then put a very strong emphasis in color. Again, a study from the inside. So this is what you see from the outside, which is very, very stark, very massive on it. And then we start to play with very strong colors to try to really bring light into a very special life. This is the thing that intrigues me very much, the strong changes you can have just by changing a color of opening a wall. Through these photographs, I will go fast to give you the impression, but even some are exaggerated by the type of lens. But really what I want to show you is the possibilities that color and light can have even in one of these kind of buildings. Look, the difference of the space on the left is about 3 times the one on the right, and what a complete different value it takes between the violet and the yellow. Look how the light is completely different in each one of them. How when you pass it, and then on the left, this was the west facade, and I designed opposite triangles in order to protect from the sun and I painted all the interior in yellow. So from the outside, the only things you see are the yellow stripes. And each one of the windows, I paint the side of it in the color I felt it was better from the inside. And this is the way it looks all the time. Here are these vertical elements closer to it. And then there you have another space which is, all of it is yellow, and how it can become really striking to get through those spaces and those windows. Look, even here changing the lens completely, how it maintains that very, very shocking experience. Another thing I'm working and intrigues me very much is how we can combine the natural light with the artificial light. Here you can see on the right, those are just holes on the wall, and I place a bulb in there. And sometimes I put a dome on top of it. So really you don't know what is artificial and what is natural light. Look, this even there are very dark pictures. The reason I wanted to show you them to you is you see that hole in which it gives the impression that the light is on, and it's only the color, is that the wall is painted yellow. Look, here on the right. You see again all those which are intentionally dark to make that experience. And here how all this gray starts to play with the colors, and how it changes completely when it gets to the light on it. Even the velvet. On here, which is the cafeteria on the lower floor and the offices on the upper floor, I changed the color because I felt it was much better to change it according to the inside. And look how nice the effects start to come out of it. As you can see, we are continuing to use the plaster. I must tell you, once we were in an airplane flying, one of my partners told me, you know, Ricardo, I'm very pleased that nobody has asked you to design an airplane, because I'm sure you will do it out of plaster. He said. Another thing we did is that instead of getting into the art study, which is very common, now let's select the art, I decided to play only with color. And the only thing we have is that this column of mirror, which plays a very nice effect, and at the same time solved me the problem of this horrible thing we are now in our civilization, which is security. We say we are civilized persons, and we have to put television cameras every place so not to have problems. So this window, which is reflected on the column, is the security office. So through the column he can see everything, and we didn't have to put any television cameras on. And these are the kind of interior spaces in which you see how this artificial light starts to play on it. This is what he sees on the right from that little window. And thus on the left is the corridor of the vertical stripes. On the right, the wall which is painted yellow is the one on the right. The one on the left is white, but look all the reflections you get through it. We design all the furniture for them, even the racks. This is on the right are the vertical elements I was talking about. Then in the inside, again playing with the natural and artificial light, and those colors on the window, the effects are very special. These are the very small offices. Here, the different kind of light you can get through color. Here we decided also to do the food in plaster. And there's again the flint and stone line. Look the play of the table with the architecture. We got into the design, and even the one on the right, which are just little things of ceramic. And then to end up, and not getting you too tired, I want to show you just very bad photographs, but it's the last two things we did, which are still under construction. This is a development we did. We did all the urban plan. We're not going to do the houses. So they told me to do something to mark the entrance to it, so I decided to do a crazy wall. And this is just a wall. That's it. It's a ravine, as you can see on the little sketch on the right, with these 3 holes. It's about 14 meters high and about 4 meters width. And it's only that color of the earth, and it is the way you enter this thing. And the effect of it is very, how it plays and how walls can change completely the atmosphere. We did this wall, we did a, I don't know if it's correct, a Pigeon house and a water tower. So this is the entrance. This is what you see when you come to the place. This is on the left is the Pigeon house. On it, here it is, which is just a piece of a combination of walls and very contrasting with the earth. On the right, we have a very strong ravine between the two sections of the development. So I did all the streets by cutting instead of cutting and filling, because by cutting and filling we were going to destroy all the vegetation. So all this earth, I didn't have a place to put it. So I decided to put it in the center and connect the two hills. So I create this passage, and we put all the earth in there. This again the Pigeon house. It doesn't have pigeons already, I hope. Here's the section of the way we did it. You can see how all this filling, which was very expensive to take it out, Mexico City's getting so big that the closest place where we can throw out that earth was about 20 miles distance. So instead of that, we fill all that, and we create that communication to it. No, I'm sorry. I will. Here you can see on this photograph how it's the filling. I just put that that little wall in there, and it came out as it was there for many years. Ready? Let me try. Right now, the thing we're working now is that we are finishing the construction of one hotel north of Acapulco, and this other project of the new city I was telling you. Those are the main things we're working. It doesn't work? No. Yes? Ah, okay. The last, we will see just a couple of the slides of this other thing. And the last thing I want to show you is a building which is almost finished. It's already occupied, but as keeping the tradition of architects, is not yet finished, which is a club, a family club in Mexico City, in which the inspiration is basically try to do a huge house, really as a club for families. So I was thinking very much on the idea of a very old hacienda and trying to make a patio and try to have all the living of people around this patio. Because of being such a big building, we did a very nice experiment, which is instead of painting the building with paint, I decided to put oxide on it. So it's copper, oxide of copper, so which we just apply directly to the plaster. And the result is, for me, is very nice. For the owners, is not, because for me it looks old, and the owners are selling a new club, so they are very worried about all the complaints about the club looking old already since the beginning. Do you want me to go only on the one on the right? Because I think I think we can continue only with the one on the right, if you want to. I'm afraid I'm getting you into the Mexican hours for dinner, so I think we can go on this one. This is the water tower, which is the center of the entrance to different lots to it. This is the little house. Is the only covered space we did, which is the club for the tennis courts, the little clubhouse. And this is the club I mentioned. So basically, it's a central patio with all kind of levels. So all the central activity is in there. Being on top of the hills, I was very much inclined to use some inclined walls on the stairs and having all kind of connections. And this is the effect of this oxide finishing on it. Here you can see how it looks, which I like very much, the way it drips. And this is one of the exits from the dressing rooms out to the courts. And this is one of the stairs. It's very, very intriguing to see how a building like this behaves with the fashion of the skates, because everybody goes up and down on skates. And these are the corridors up at the level of the dressing rooms. This is one of the interior spaces. These are some of the dressing rooms, again, with very strong colors and always with a window to look at the end of any of the spaces. In here, what we were able to achieve is that the whole club lives under natural light. So we're missing the other half, but I don't think it's very important. So this is what we have done, the way I think, where I come from. I hope is not very complicated, the picture I had presented to you. I repeat that we Mexicans say, and we always claim, that we are very simple people, and the truth is that we are extremely complicated. So I'm sure that all the presentation is extremely complicated, but I hope you are able to arrive to some conclusions. And now, well, I'm ready for any questions, comments, or criticisms. I'm all yours for anything you want to say. Sure. Hi, how are you?
I'm sure you didn't mean what you said about designing for photography.
I didn't see you.
No, you can't deny that you've been preaching for many weeks among these people about how important Masari communication is, and that even coming here and seeing my own beautiful pictures, I say, well, my God, this is great because now we can see the power of the camera. How else can you communicate?
Yeah. No, to clarify a little bit that thing, I feel that the mistake is when we ask you photographers to make the building to look the building something that is not, and I think there's a bias of architects. We always ask we always tell you, why don't you use a wide angle to make the space larger? We should have made the space larger instead of asking you to do that.
In the beginning of your talk, you presented what I thought was a very interesting portrayal of what you saw as the vernacular, Mexican architecture, the stuff that the people themselves did. And you explained how this was done without the aid of the educated architect.
Yes.
It was very exciting work. But as as you went into your own work, I saw what seemed to my eyes to be a distinct gap between what you saw as the excellent vernacular that you espoused and what you yourself did. Specifically, in your interest of using or reinterpreting what was good about your own culture, I did, in one example of your vernacular, see for one, houses that are buried under soil, as you did in your hotels, or the use of surrealism, which you mentioned. Now, I see a split between the two, which you presented as being good vernacular for your own work. And I wondered if you could draw some.
Sure. Well, look, I'm glad you make that question, because I think it's one of the most difficult things when you have the opportunity of having a point of inspiration. When you have such a strong point of source of inspiration, the risk is to try to copy it. And here what I'm trying is not to copy the vernacular, but to use the sensations or the emotions I receive on that architecture and try to use them in there. To follow a little bit your question, for example, I'm talking about surrealism. I think that vernacular architecture has a lot of surrealism on it, about the spaces, about the way they handle light. The idea of burning a building is not that I don't see anything against a gap between burning a building or not burning it, because it's vernacular. Let's say vernacular, if we can see, it's a very natural thing, a very natural construction. And what I was trying is to do a very natural building in the environment. So the main thing is that what I would like to, and that's why I say that maybe I'm not achieving that, is to create the same emotions through my architecture that the ones I feel in vernacular. So either it doesn't matter if I am able to create those emotions. I don't care if I create them with plaster, with brick, with stainless steel, or with glass. The value I see on the attitude of vernacular architecture is that it's a very natural attitude, a logical one. But if sometimes I use, as you saw, the slope roof, and some other ones is horizontal. And I think that's immaterial. It's immaterial if it's buried or not. It's immaterial if it's, we're talking about surrealism. I think maybe the mistake is that I use what could be a sophisticated word of surrealism. I think the surrealism is there in vernacular. So that's the intention. It may, and I agree with you, and I think it should be a gap. It should be a gap, because the thing I'm doing is in another time, for another purposes, and for another society, for different people. So it should be a gap on it. Now, how much influence there is in my work, of course, it may happen, as you say, that there are certain things in my work that has nothing to do with vernacular. Yes, I agree with you. There are other influences that come to me. But what I'm trying is to bring those feelings up to the problems of today. I don't know if I'm answering the question, but at least I try to answer you the intention. Maybe I'm not achieving, and maybe the reaction is saying, well, this guy is doing something different. But one thing, if you want a little more on it, is I try to do a building. When I do a building, I try to do it in such a way that that building can only be built in that place, in that location, and at this time. I think that's a good building. So I couldn't start to try to do buildings that look old, that look alike to vernacular architecture. I have to do buildings corresponding to the 20th century. I have to do buildings who correspond to the Mexico of today, which is another type of country. So it should be a gap, as it is a gap between when you are young or you are old. But there is, I hope there are some roots which go through it, and those are the ones I try to keep. I understand that it's difficult to capture them, but I try to keep them over there. Yes?
Something which was brought out when you talked about the influences with vernacular, Villagran. Has it influenced your work?
Yes, as I said before, he has influenced my work. Talking a little more ample on that influence, I can tell you that I feel that the influence of Barragán on myself has been more as a person than as an architect. I think he is one of the most extremely sensitive and sophisticated persons I have met. The way he lives, the way he talks, the way he treats people are unbelievable. I can tell you, and this is not to try to take merit out of his architecture. I think the best thing you can say about an architect is that he's a better person than an architect. So Barragán has influenced me very strongly as a person. As an architect, also he has influence. I think he understood all those things we were talking about Mexico very clearly. And now the problems he has attacked as an architect are very different of the ones I have attacked. But it's no doubt that there is an influence of him on me, without any doubt.
I was wondering about the personal relationships between the two in terms of you were disciplined of him or just a friend?
Let me tell you the personal relation. I met Barragán in 1968 when a friend of both took him to the dedication of the first huge building I did, which was a factory. And I like very much his attitude because he came to me and he said, your architecture is great, your gardens are lousy. So they are the most horrible gardens I have ever seen, he told me. And he was right, they were horrible. So we developed a friendship over there. Then I invite him to, as a consultant, and at that time I was doing the Camino Real in Mexico. So I told him, well, okay, I agree they are lousy. Why don't you help me with the gardens? So he acted as a consultant for the gardens at the Camino Real. I have never worked with him. Afterwards, we developed this friendship. He invited me a couple of times to work in some projects. They never materialized. That was one here in California, as a matter of fact. We were going to do something around horses in Ohio for Michael Butler, the promoter of hair. Of course, nothing happened. We came here, and then we were going to do a fountain and nothing. So we have, basically my relation with him is personal, more than in work. I see him often. We never, very seldom talk about architecture, very seldom get into a drawing. So that's why I tell you that it's much more of an influence of a person and his sensibility.
How selective are you in the number or type of project?
Let me tell you that's a very good question. I think that the project is not the result of an architect. Very definitely, I think it's a result of an architect and of a client. So the way I do it is, and this I must confess, I have been extremely lucky. Is no merit of myself, it's just luck that I have been able to do this. First of all, I never enter competitions. I have only entered one competition in my life, and I entered because I felt it was an obligation as a citizen to enter. And this was a project to do the government bank, which is equivalent to the Treasury Department offices, headquarters, downtown Mexico. And I felt it was an obligation to settle a point of view of what you should build when you build in a historic center. Fortunately, we won the project. We are building that. So first of all, I don't enter competition. Second, by the same token, I try not to promote jobs. I think that every time an architect promotes a job, he becomes a businessman. So when somebody calls me, the first thing I do is to go out with him and spend as much time as is needed to visiting my job, my work. And I ask him always if he's enthusiastic about my work. That's the first step, and you gained 100% on the design. Regarding the type of jobs, I don't care. I think all kinds of the jobs are interesting. And the final thing is that I don't want to take more work than the one I can handle. So we have kept the size of the office. I am very lucky. We are 3 partners in the office. I'm very lucky because the other 2 take care of all the dirty work. They take care of the administrative and the organization. I couldn't live without them. They do all the job, and I give all the credit to them, because there's no use to have good ideas if you're not able to realize them. So what we do is that we never take more work than the one I can handle. And I want to get involved all the way to the details. We never do a job if we don't do the interiors, never. And by doing the interiors, I'm talking about getting involved into the ashtrays. So I never, that is what marks the volume of work we can handle in the office, how much I personally can handle regarding design. Now, this is a very comfortable position. I have been lucky enough to be able to put those conditions and be accepted. That is pure luck, is not merit of mine.
It seems that just when you're talking that you have a very social view of architecture, and that you attribute a lot of influence to society and the condition that you're in, that to what extent do you think you can contribute, or that how much should you contribute, and what are your limitations?
I must say you're doing very good questions. Let me tell you, that is one of the things that intrigues me and worries me very much. The reason it worries me is because Mexico is no doubt a country with a tremendous problem of social differences. If you look at my work, it seems that I only work for people, for wealthy people, or for things which doesn't have to do with the reality of Mexico. First, the attitude in this kind of work, my attitude is that I want to improve the conditions of the people who use the buildings. To tell you something, for example, I didn't show it today. I did the IBM manufacturing plant in Guadalajara. There we were able to take all the design all the way through in the social problem, and IBM accepted. So we treated workers and employees exactly the same. They not only have the same entrance, they don't only have the same dining room, they work under the same space. We designed all the furniture for manufacturing, and we were able to develop a complete concept of social use of the building. They use the building on weekends for parties. They use the dining room for their own benefit during the week. So that's one part of it. I did a very large project of low-cost housing with a lot of problems. I think it's not solved. I didn't show it today because it's a very long presentation. We made most of the same mistakes everybody has done. And I would like very much, and this project I'm talking about, the new city, will offer the opportunity of getting involved in the problem of housing in Mexico. The most difficult problem we have in Mexico is housing, as every place. And it's a problem which involves really social problems more than design problems. So I try to go little by little, and I think one thing I think, or at least I feel, of course in a very small scale, I'm just one person, I feel I'm contributing, is trying to rescue the values and the love for Mexico. We are extremely influenced by the life in the United States, and we are destroying ourselves. And I always try to show that we can be Mexicans, very proudly Mexicans, without getting involved in a similar life to the United States. And I think these buildings or this construction offer that opportunity. So those are the approaches. But to be very honest, I feel I haven't done enough on social.
If, let's say, just you and a handful of colleagues that actually care, about humans and what you're doing, that, what you produce is maybe 1% of everything that's built, and that the other 99% of what's built is just saying that we don't care that you're a human, and to hell with you, that, it doesn't get depressing or something that.
Yes, I agree with you. Look, very good question. We have discussed the office and pick up the machine guns. It's the only other solution when you live in a country like that. And I'm very optimistic and very positive, and I think we are better off this way. Now, trying to be optimistic about what you're saying, one thing that happens in Mexico, as any Latin country, is that the possibilities a person has about doing things are unbelievable. It's very different of the circumstances here, for good or for bad. But if you really fight and you really do and you press, you can do incredible things. As I tell you, I was answering the question about how selective I am. We are at least at this moment lucky enough to select our jobs. And in that thing we are being very strictly socially. I don't like to get involved with people which are not helping Mexico, for example. And those are the things that suddenly you find out that you're doing good things. And suddenly you find out that people start to talk. And suddenly, as today, I am lucky enough to come here and talk about Mexico and make you try to help a little bit to make you understand Mexico. And little by little, you find that you are able to do things. And I agree with you. Sometimes I get depressed. It's no doubt. Sometimes you really get desperate about all the problems we have. But otherwise, what can I do? Those are the only two ways to go. So I don't know if in the right track, but we are trying to.
Mexico is highly centralized in architecture as well as other things. Do you see any possibility of a strong regional architecture development?
Not at this moment, but at least I feel that there is a reaction, very strong reaction of looking for new architecture. I feel we are still on the stage of maybe doing some crazy things, some very outstanding things. But there is a reaction of doing Mexican things. For example, I can tell you that right now, at this moment, I'm part of the jury for the new building of the